Every one of us is tasked with bringing the world to perfection. This week's Parashah reveals a secret to help us do just that. This week, in addition to marking 413 days that our brothers and sisters have been held captive in Gaza, also marks the fourth yahrzeit of Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. Rabbi Sacks has been one of the most impactful rabbis on my continuing journey and one of the strongest Jewish voices of our generation. I can't help but wonder what his voice would have added to the post-October 7th world, but I know it would have been inspiring. This video is based on some of Rabbi Sacks' writings. May his teachings continue to inspire Jews around the world and help bring the world a little closer to perfection. Let's take a step back and remind ourselves where we are in the origin story of our people. We met Avraham and Sarah 2 Parashot ago. Multiple times since then, Hashem made promises to Avraham that his descendants would be too numerous to count and they would inherit the land of Israel. Each of those promises are made between 4 and 7 times. As we start Parashah Chayei Sarah, how are we doing on those promises? Well, Avraham has one son who is unmarried and is childless. And while Avraham is an honored resident in the land, none of it belongs to him. Not exactly making fantastic progress to fulfilling those promises. But Avraham knew something about Hashem's promises. Hashem's promise was not a sit back and watch Hashem make it happen kind of promise. Avraham knew that it was a promise that would require our full involvement. So what does Avraham do in this week's Parashah? He acts. He buys a piece of land and makes sure Yitzchak finds a wife. Fast forward to the end of the Parashah. As Avraham dies at age 175, how much closer are we to fulfilling Hashem's promises? Avraham owns one tiny piece of land, a burial site in a small field. And while Yitzchak is now married, he remains childless. Avraham barely moved the needle at all. We're hardly any closer to the promises being fulfilled. Remember 2 weeks ago, back in Parashah Lech Lecha, we said the message was that the children of Avraham aren't afraid of an impossible task. When we're told to count the stars, we start counting one star at a time, while the message at the end of Avraham's life is the bookend to that same message. An impossible task is not completed all at once. According to the Chinese proverb, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, or in the words of Pirkei Avot, it is not your duty to finish the task, but neither are you at liberty to stand idly by. Avraham knew that the fulfillment of the promise wouldn't be quick. It would take generations. But just because it wasn't possible to achieve in his lifetime doesn't mean it's not his responsibility to act. Avraham left the world a little closer to fulfilling Hashem's promises. We went from owning none of the promised land to owning a tiny piece. We went from having no descendants to having one married child. Avraham wasn't daunted by the notion that he would not be able to accomplish everything in his lifetime, even if that lifetime spanned 175 years. But he knew that it was his job to move the needle even just a little bit. There's a midrash relating to the end of this week's Parashah. The midrash says, all the days that Sarah was alive, there was a lamp kindled from Shabbat night until Shabbat night. When Sarah died, the lamp ceased. When Rebekah came, the lamp returned. Chaverim, my friends, a light was extinguished on October 7th and a dark hatred seemed to take its place. It's time for that light to return. It's time for us to banish the hatred by relighting that candle, just as the midrash that happened when Rebekah came to Sarah's tent. This Shabbat, many communities around the world are participating in the Shabbat Project. The Shabbat Project is a global grassroots movement uniting Jews of all backgrounds and levels of observance to experience one full Shabbat together in unity. What better way is there to combat the hate and darkness in the world than to light a candle, a Shabbat candle? Whether or not you can fully participate in the Shabbat Project, my challenge to all of you this week is to move your Shabbat needle, even if it's just a little bit. Light Shabbat candles, go to shul, invite guests, share some words of Torah at your table, even if that table is not a traditional Shabbat one. Will it rebuild the shattered world? No, but it will move the needle just a little bit, just as Avraham moved the needle on Hashem's promises. That is the lesson of this week's Parsha and the lesson that bookends Avraham's life. It is not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you at liberty to stand idly by. That is one thing we can learn from this week's Parsha. How will you step up this week to bring the world a little closer to perfection? Shabbat Shalom and Am Yisroel Chai.